I've just spin some of the negatives into positives. So the negative thing might be impetuosity or irrepressibility, but I kind of managed to turn that into what seems like sort of being quick thinking. It's just because you haven't got a filter. Being hyperactive, but that can be having an excessive creative energy. I would say, you know, the things that are most associated with ADHD are impetuosity, irrepressibility, attention span, and they call it ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, but actually it's attention surfeit. You're paying attention to far too many things and not necessarily the ones you should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
But as I said, a lot of those can be positives, because actually if you've got energy, that's a good thing. If you're impetuous, that can mean you get to an idea quicker. You can think out of the box, you can make connections. So I say it's my best friend and my worst enemy. Worst enemy because you don't like being disorganized and you don't like constantly losing things, or you don't like losing the track of what you're saying. But the positives are, you like the fact that you can make those jumps, you like the fact that, you know, you can get to an idea quickly, and you can make random connections.
Somebody once said to me, it's like having a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. So that it's going so fast, but actually the mechanics of your body and the rest of you can't quite catch up with it.
It's a bit like plate spinning sometimes. I feel like sometimes my life used to be, you know how you see these circus acts and there's 6 plates spinning and there's always one just about to fall off. Sometimes your life can be like that. Another thing is if you go into a department store and there's 6 different televisions in the TV department, they're showing different channels and you're sort of flicking. But they can all sometimes go to the same channel because you have an ability to hyper-focus on something which really does engage your attention. And part of the thing with children is if you find a thing that really engages their attention, then you know you can lose them for hours because they're absolutely focused and concentrating. So I think we're increasingly talking about the positives, which is why companies are now increasingly looking to recruit people who are neurodiverse, because there are many, many positives that come with it.
There are, and yet you think of the number of children and adults who maybe don't have the diagnosis or the recognition, and they're not in an environment which is supportive, and it can be absolutely awful for them and their families.
It's a terrible struggle. I mean, you know, I worked out once, if it's 1 in 20, because I think the World Health Organization says about 5% people with ADHD, so that works out about 600,000 children. So it's almost like 1 in every classroom, if you like. And they, in the classroom and at home, go through hell because, you know, they think differently, they're learning differently. And we have an education system which isn't necessarily geared up to people who are different, whose brains work differently, who are irrepressible, who have an excess of energy. But science is catching up. That's the exciting thing is now that it used to be seen in terms of behaviour or a sort of moral thing almost, ADHD, but increasingly now with the science we can see from the brain scans, we can see what part of the brain is not developing, and that's, as I say, often the part that deals with impetuosity, and the part that stops you from being impulsive, that's not so developed. So we can see instead of being a naughty child, it's actually a neurodevelopmental condition, and that's what it is, and it's good to see that that's being caught up. Now we need understanding, we need support.
You have worked with a lot of families. I work with families with autism and ADHD, and often they can go together, can't they?
Yeah.
What would you say to families who are struggling? Maybe they can't get a diagnosis because there's such a long waiting list. Maybe they're misunderstood in a mainstream school.
Well, it's understanding. I mean, you've got to have limitless resources of understanding. I mean, first of all, in terms of getting a diagnosis, it's difficult, and we need to really push for more awareness, which is what we're doing, and of course in helping schools and GPs and parents to work together so that it's picked up early. Let's make an analogy with if you have type 2 diabetes. That's because the body isn't regulating insulin properly. In many cases with ADHD, it's just because the brain is not regulating dopamine efficiently. It's something that needs to be understood and supported. And I think the best thing I can say is that if you're a family that has an ADHD child in it, the most important thing is not to beat them up, and that the child doesn't beat themselves up about it, because it's so easy. I remember as a child I was called scatty and forgetful, and you know, my parents would have a go at me and children would have a go at me.
And you were the problem.
Yes, and you already know, and you're already hyping blame on yourself, and you're saying, why have I done this again? Why have I messed up again? And so, you know, when somebody else does that, it doesn't really help. It just puts pain on pain on pain and puts sort of salt into the wounds. So I always say, don't beat yourself up. It's what makes you who you are, and you're just different. And the best advice I ever had was a guy whose daughter had been through university, she had a child, and I said, how did you cope with when she was younger as a child? He said, you know what? We just loved her.
That's so nice. We loved her. She was different. See it as a superpower, or certainly a positive.
Yeah, not all the time, because it can be. But for those who have it, they would watch this now and they'd be throwing things at the television and saying, "My life is hell, Rory. How dare you say that I have superpowers?" What I'm saying is that we can help with the hell if it's picked up early. We can regulate it, we can mediate it. You can't cure it, but you can find ways to manage it. Maybe find a job or a lifestyle where it's an asset and not a liability. But in terms of the superpower, yes, those exist. If you find something that engages your attention, if a teacher gets you, if a doctor, medication is a help, it is not like antidepressants, something you take a long time to come on and long time to get off. It's like, I've been told, it's like putting on a pair of glasses that, you can go, gosh, the biggest thing people say is, if only I had known, I wouldn't have gone through that. As a child, my childhood would have been different if I'd only known what it is, and I'd only known that I was different and there was something I could do about it.
Rory, thank you.
It's a pleasure.